Did you miss me?
You don't have to be poor anymore. Jesus is here. The loudspeaker spoke up and said, Christianity is stupid.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the Redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is curled up asleep on the couch, thankfully. Ash is asleep on my bed. Not sure exactly where Lord Squeakington is. And I have a new addition curled up on the floor, which I'll be talking about here in a bit. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. And assuming I can remember how to make everything work, this is the return episode. And for those of you who might have been worried that I wasn't going to come back, let me just say that despite taking a break from the podcast, I did still keep working on it. I also need to thank a couple of listeners who upped their Patreon support after I made my announcement that I was taking a break. That's nice of you to show enough confidence in me to believe that I was coming back, and I may very well need the extra money. I also must have picked up a few extra listeners because even though I haven't posted anything this month, my download numbers are about the same as they were for the past 2 months. Hello to all of you out there listening for the first time. Another little fun fact, this episode marks the 5th anniversary of my starting the show. Normally I can't be bothered to pay attention to such things, but I happened to stumble across something which had a date attached to it and was from when I started the show. The exact date that the first episode went up was June 25th, 2014. Now, let me go over some of the things that will be changing with the show. I'm going to have to do a less structured version simply because Fuzznuts has been so fucking demanding with me. Right now he's just woken up and debating as to what he's going to do next. But, for whatever reason, even though I am home more and I spend more time with him, whenever I sit down at the computer to start working on the script, somebody decides that's the perfect time to show up and start headbutting the human. So, I'm not going to be able to have the scripts detailed as much as I would like, which means the content will be a little rougher around the edges from now on. Apologize, but I think you can understand. It's either that or a lot longer delays between episodes, and I'm not wanting to do that. One of the other things that I've decided I'm going to do is cut down on the number of stories in some of the news episodes, rather than hitting, the usual group of topics. Generally, what I try to do is, I have the usual categories of stories I like to cover, and I try to find 3 stories for each category. I'm going to cut that down, and, I may do single topic episodes. I may do episodes where I cover all the categories, but there's only one story in each category. Or I may just do a couple of stories from 2 different categories or the same category. Because one of the things that I have noticed, because while I was off, I pulled myself out of a lot of social media. I didn't stop looking at some of it, but I stopped posting in some of it. And I noticed that there's things that people will have not exactly the same conversations, but the way they discuss about topics, you can see that they're they're avoiding issues that each side raises. So somebody will talk about global warming, and they'll raise a particular issue about, say, sea level rise. And the person they're having the debate with won't address the issue of sea level rise at all. But the way their response is structured, it almost seems like they are. And unless you're paying close attention, you don't notice that they've skipped that issue. And I've noticed that in a lot of things. And a lot of things, as in a lot of discussions, as well as a lot of news stories. There's stuff going on that people kind of hit the margins of it, but don't go for the deeper details when they really should. So that's why I want to do some of those deeper dive episodes. And I don't know what regularity they will be. Events at the time will probably dictate which one becomes a deeper dive and which ones are more like the usual news episodes. Now, as for what I've been doing while I've been off, that's a little complicated. The one thing I realized after I decided to take my little vacation is that, hey, there's art museums in Nashville and bus runs, from here to Nashville, and I have Fridays off. So I was like, yeah, I'll just hop the bus, go to Nashville, and spend the day hanging out at the art museums. Well, the first Friday, I didn't get up in time. I'm not used to getting up at 4:30 in the morning, so that was a bit of a problem. The second Friday, well, that was, I was going to do it, and then I saw the weather, and it was going to be doing nothing but raining buckets all day long. Well, it's one thing when you can get around town in a car. It's another thing when you have to walk everywhere or take the bus. So I was like, no, I'm not going, because, it was pouring down rain when I got up in the morning, which was in time to catch the bus, and I'm like, I gotta go 40 minutes to catch the bus in the rain. Actually be longer than 40, since I'd have to walk and not be able to ride the scooter. So then I was like, how bad's it going to be all day long? And it was going to be bad, so I was like, nope. Next Friday, something came up. I don't remember what now, but something happened and I couldn't go. I think it's because I had to work a bunch that Thursday night. No, it couldn't be that. I don't remember. So that leaves yesterday. Well, yeah, yesterday. And there was a problem there. Because Tuesday of this past week, I got a knock on my door. About 9 o'clock at night, I think. 8, 9 o'clock, somewhere around there. One of my neighbors was there with all his kids. And he's holding this little kitten in his hand. The kitten is so small, it fits in his hand, which is not a, good sign. And he says, we found this kitten in the road, and we don't think kittens should live in the road, and we don't know how to take care of it. Can you take care of it? Of course, I'm like, yes, I'll take care of it. I didn't really want another cat, but, what the hell are you going to do? And the poor little thing's eyes are still blue, so it's real young. And this past week, so, I get the kitten and I put it in my room with Ash and Lord Squeakington. I don't know how Lord Squeakington will react to it, but since he still flitters around in the corners, avoiding me, I figured if he got too rough with the kitten, it wouldn't be too hard, at least when I was around, to shoo him off. And since Ash is pretty much just doesn't give a shit as long as he's able to lay it out whoever he wants, I figured he wouldn't bother the kitten. And he doesn't have, since whomever owned him before, I rescued him, declawed him, he can't do too much damage to it. So even if he didn't like the kitten, it's going to be fairly safe in my room. Well, so I have the kitten. Don't have a name for it. If you have suggestions, I would love to hear them. I'll put a picture in the show notes for this episode. He, and it's definitely he, he's a tabby, so he kind of looks like Buttons did, but he also has Maine Coon type markings, so I don't know if he is actually a Maine Coon or just shares markings with what Maine Coons do. But he's awfully freaking tiny. Literally the same size Buttons was when just about when I rescued her, and it's 2 years to the month since I rescued her, and a year to the month since she suddenly fell over and died. So, anyways, he's in there. Thursday night of last week was our potluck for the local Democratic Party. I went to that. There was not a large turnout, which was disappointing. The county president wasn't there. That was a real kind of a gut punch. I thought she ought to be at every function possible, and she wasn't. So, but there was a handful of people there, a couple of new people, so that's still a bit of a positive. They didn't talk too much about a lot of things going on. Unfortunately, at least not that I can recall. They did mention that tonight is the Democratic Party, State Democratic Party's 3-star dinner, formerly known as the Jackson Mule Days dinner. I think it was Jackson Mule Days. It was Jackson Day dinner at the least, if not Jackson Mule Day. Named after Andrew Jackson, and they finally changed it. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but they finally changed it because they realized if we're going to get African Americans here, we need to have a dinner that is not named after a slave owner who happened to be president. So they changed it to the 3-star dinner after the 3 stars on the Tennessee flag. I went to that tonight, and I will talk about that here in a bit. So that was the big discussion that they had that I can recall. I was mad because I had all this stuff ready that I was going to take to the potluck, because at work we never work overtime on Thursdays. Usually on Thursdays it is basically just marking time until the end of our shift, because we really can't cook anything, because anything we cook takes 8 hours roughly. Sometimes 12 or 13 hours, depending on what it is and how much of it there is. And nobody works on Fridays except for the sanitation department, so no point in having us cook anything. All we're doing is unloading the ovens and getting stuff ready for Sunday when second shift comes in and starts everything up. Well, for some reason, they decided that we had to cook some beef fat. Now, beef fat doesn't take 8 hours to cook. It only takes a couple hours. But we put it in the ovens late in the day, which meant I had to work overtime. So, I got off of work basically just a few minutes before I was supposed to be there for the potluck dinner. And while I can get home fairly quickly, the stuff I had prepared I hadn't fully prepared it yet, and some of it I'd have to heat up and things like that, and by the time I got all that done and got down to the dinner, it would have been about halfway over, or a little bit beyond that. So there was no point, and the offices where they hold the potluck dinners is literally about 100 yards away from where I work, so I just walked over there. The one thing we did do that it was my idea. I ordered a Donald Trump toilet brush off of Amazon, and I brought that, and so we could auction that off, raise a little money for the party, which we did. And then tonight, a couple other things. The other thing I noticed Thursday night about the new kitten was he was kind of lethargic, which had me really worried. So I was watching him thinking, well, I may have to take him to the vet. And then Friday he was up bouncing around, so I wasn't too terribly worried about it. And I did fiddle-farted around the house. Not really motivated to do much of anything because I was just kind of pissed off that I didn't, I had all this food that I prepped for the potluck dinner, and I'm like, I got to figure out what to do with it because I don't want to eat all of it because I'd be eating off in it for a week, and it gets kind of boring after a while. So I had to clean out the freezer and move all that shit in there, and I'm going to have to get a new refrigerator here at some point because mine's definitely on its last legs. My brother revived it a couple of years ago, but it's still not doing well, and it's going to die in the next 12 months for certain, which sucks because it's a pain in the ass to get it out of this place. We had to take the doors off to get it in because it's just that much wider than the front door, and I got to rearrange the fucking furniture to be able to move it in and out because of the way the furniture is set up now. It's a little different than what it was when I moved the fridge in here the first time. So, there's that little fun bit of trivia. Now, and the other thing that happened Friday, we had really bad storms, and it knocked the power out for a couple hours, and that was fun. And that was kind of significant because Saturday, I was looking at the kitten, and one of its eyes was kind of funky looking. Not the eyeball itself, but it was crusty. So I was like, I better call the vet and get him looked at. And I wanted to kind of get them to evaluate him anyways to make sure that there was nothing obviously wrong that I wouldn't notice. So I call the vet and I say, got a kitten needs to be looked at, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, our computers are down. That was because a result of power being out the night before, and they hadn't been able to get them up and running yet. And they said, just show up at 9:30, and we don't know if anybody else has got an appointment, but we'll see you then. So I go. Take the kitten in. They look him over. They're not really sure what's wrong with his eyeball. They're like, it could be that he's got, some kind of infection, or it could be he's scratched the lens. Of course, they're like, we probably ought to give him some deworming medicine since, I literally don't know anything about him. He only weighed a pound. That's how tiny that thing is. So, I'm like, sure, go ahead and do all that. And I opted not to, because they said we can do two things. We can do a dye to check his eyeball to make sure it's not scratched. If it's scratched, we do this or that. Or we can just give him antibiotics. And I'm like, well, let's just go ahead and give him the antibiotics for the eye. They have an ointment to put on. And, they gave him some deworming medicine and something for something else. Just a general precautionary measure, anything that you would have seen. They gave some antibiotics that I have to give him once a day, and then they gave me an ointment that I have to put on his eyeball twice a day. been very well behaved the times I've done it. And I noticed when I went to give him his second dose that the eyeball had already shown signs of clearing up. So I'm almost certain that it's, he had an infection and not that he had damaged his eye. But it took almost 2 hours for that whole thing because I got in there. It took him a little while to, see me as far as, just checking us in. And then it took, once I got into the exam room, it took like half an hour, 45 minutes before anybody showed up to examine him. They did the exam, which was, 15, 20 minutes. And then I had to wait for some other stuff that they did and them to get the medicine and all that. So like I said, it took almost 2 hours. So I get out of there and I get ready because I've got to leave for the 3-star dinner in Nashville. And I was excited by it because I'd never been before, and I wanted to see. I thought there would be a possibility that there would be somebody from, I guess, East Tennessee that I know who may have shown up. I didn't see them if they did, but I got, and I was hoping to be able to talk to Mary Mancini, who's the head of the Tennessee Democratic Party, and I was also hoping to be able to talk to Kyrsten Sinema, who is the first woman elected to the Senate from Arizona. She's also the first openly bisexual woman elected to the Senate. You may remember the photograph of Mike Pence swearing her in. And she was dressed, one doesn't want to say provocatively, but she was showing, she was wearing a very short skirt. I think she was, let me just Google this. Okay. She wasn't wearing a really high skirt. I mean, it came just past her knee, but obviously very provocative. She was wearing a sleeveless top, I'm sure as a fuck you for all the people who were pissed off about Michelle Obama exposing her upper arms and that disgrace. And she definitely had a "I will fuck your shit up" expression on her face when Pence swore her in. Then once sworn in, she promptly voted with Republicans a number of times. So I wasn't quite sure what to expect with her. Didn't get to meet her or Mary Mancini. Saw him, heard him speak, but did not get to meet them. And I'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, the way they do the dinners is, and this is their big fundraiser for the year, they go to the county parties and they say, here's the rate for somebody to come to the dinner, and if you get enough people to fill up a whole table, you'll get a lower rate. So the goal, of course, is to get a whole table, or at the very least, if not multiple tables. We would have had a full table, but one person had to back out at the last minute. They still paid for their tickets, so they're out the money. But the people that went was myself, the former head of the party in the county, who he's no longer the head, but he is an elected official in the county, and he also is a executive on the state party. So he's, kind of important. The next, the other people were a married couple. I don't know what she does for a living, and I only found out on the way home because I rode with a couple of people that went. He is a physicist who he's worked for a bunch of universities and things like that, and has literally traveled all over the world for scientific conferences. One of the things that came up during dinner was that about 10 or so years ago, he and his wife were in Russia for a conference of some sort. He didn't remember what kind of conference it was. And then there was another woman who came with us whom I'd never met before. And she works for the city planning department in some capacity. And then another gentleman whom I'd never seen before, but was known to most of the other people at the table. He showed up. And that was it from our county, which was rather disappointing. I would have liked to have seen, again, the president of our county party there, and a few of the other executive officers there from our county party, but they weren't there. But I went. And the evening consisted of them. They did. They talked about some of the things that had happened in the past year and the efforts in the State House, because we have this huge problem in our State House right now. I know I mentioned it a little bit in a previous episode, so I won't go into too much detail, but essentially we have one of the most corrupt legislatures in the country, and it's almost all, it's Republican controlled, though Democrats are a small minority. They can still have some impact, but not a lot. We've got a guy who's a sex offender in power there, and the House, the Speaker of the House is, covered up for a couple of racists on his staff, the sex offender, and done some other stuff, and is being forced out, but at a very, very slow pace. We've even hit the national news a couple of times with some of the shit that's been going on. That's how bad it is. And I don't know if this made the national news or not, but there's a handful of women who were sexually assaulted when they were in high school by Representative David Byrd. And so there was these women who, as I said, they had been sexually assaulted by him when they were in high school. And they wanted to meet with the governor to, discuss getting him removed from office, because this guy's a Republican, the governor is a Republican, and so holds some sway over things. And instead of meeting with him, he had them arrested. Because that's how we do things here in Tennessee. So there's a lot going on here. And they talked about that. They talked about other issues like the fact that we did not expand Medicaid. So we have all these rural hospitals closing. And there are people who are going to die because of it. One example I read about was a woman whose mother had a heart attack and, was just a few minutes away from the hospital, got her mother in, got her treated, mother's fine. A month later, that hospital closed, and the nearest hospital was over an hour's drive away, which means that there would be a good chance her mother would die if she had another heart attack. And who knows how many other people are like that. We've had 13 close, I think, this year. It's been since Governor Lee took office. And, the situation is only going to get worse. And he also cut payments to hospitals and things like that, which is why a lot of them are closing and why we can expect more to close in the future. So, anyways, Mary Mancini, talks, and she gives out it wasn't her, somebody else who I don't remember. Anyways, they gave awards out to the Democrats in the state legislature who fought against Governor Lee and, tried to get Medicaid expanded, et cetera, et cetera. And some of those Democrats, I've got to give lots and lots of credit to, because they were very, very aggressive, very bullish, very much the way that we need to be right now. Mary Mancini had the attitude that a lot of Democrats in office, not merely at the state level, but also at the federal level have, which is, well, we just hold on for a little while. Things will flip come the next election, but it's like, what they don't understand is that in the meantime, a whole lot of people are going to die, and there's going to be, if we're not aggressively attacking the Republicans in the right way, there's not going to be a large flip in the government come the next election, and we need the biggest flip possible that we can get. We need as many Democrats in power after 2020 as we can possibly get if we want to fix all the damage that Trump's done. And even then, because of the way the election system works in the U.S., I mean, let's say we get, we get a Democratic president in 2020, the House majority grows, Democrats take control of the Senate, but because only roughly half of the Senate seats are up for election in 2020, we would not be able to get an overwhelming majority of Democrats in office then. So that Democratic president might be able to breeze shit right through the House. They could, anything they wanted, the House could get it done, get it passed, and sent to the Senate. But it's going to be a tough fight to get it through the Senate. And that's assuming that they can get a Democratic majority in the Senate. If it stays the same, which it's probably going to do. I mean, may flip a seat here and there, but, the balance will still be the same because of other seats being flipped. They won't be able to get a lot done, and that's terrifying to me. It should be terrifying to anybody out there. So that was kind of my problem with Mary Mancini. It was also my problem with Kyrsten Sinema. Because she came up and she gave a speech, and one of the things that struck me, first of all, is, when I grew up as a little kid, and, anytime you would see portrayals of Abraham Lincoln, he always had this deep, resonant voice, whatever actor was portraying him. And then when I got older, I guess it was early 2000s, NPR did a segment on one of their news shows called Lost and Found Sound. And these were old recordings that were historically important that people hadn't heard in a long time. And one of them was a recording of a guy who, and it was made, I don't remember when, but he was he was a young kid, and he saw Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. And he said, that Abraham Lincoln had a very high-pitched voice. Well, that kind of blows your mind. And they didn't, the recording and everything like that, and the NPR wrapper around the recording didn't give any kind of authenticity to that. I mean, never said, well, we don't know for certain that this guy actually saw Lincoln, but his description of Lincoln's voice is accurate. Or, they just said, he is so-and-so, he supposedly saw Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. played the recording, and that was about it. And come to find out that, whether or not that guy was right, or whether or not that guy actually saw Lincoln speak, he was right about Lincoln's voice. Lincoln did not have a deep, melodious voice. He had a high voice. And while we don't have any recordings of what Lincoln sounded like, Daniel Day-Lewis did try to duplicate the high voice as described by people who actually knew Lincoln. So, Kristen Sinema's voice was higher and softer than I expected. So I was a bit taken aback by that. I thought she would have, a very firm and commanding voice, and she didn't. And the speech she gave was very practiced, very polished, and was essentially a speech she could have given anywhere. And I'm not trying to be derisive towards her when I say all this. But it was a speech by the numbers. In other words, you come up, you start talking, you open up with some nice statements about where you are. You then reflect your own community, your home state, and, you talk about these things. And it was, a fine speech. And she talked, one of the things I want to make this clear, because it does show that she is a remarkable woman. She talked about growing up in the 80s and her family losing everything when the economy went in the tank, and having to live in an abandoned gas station with no power and no water until her parents could get jobs. So, do not think that I'm belittling this woman in any way. I'm not. I mean, she has done remarkable things considering what happened to her as a child. And let me point this out. There was some asshole who didn't heckle her, but she was talking about, when things were going downhill with her family when the economy tanked, that, somebody repossessed the family car. It was, I think, in El Camino. It was or Torino, something like that. It was an American car with a foreign name for the model, and she called it ugly, and some asshole heckled her and said, "Well, they're not ugly. I own that. I own a classic one. They're beautiful." I mean, she dealt with it well, but fuck that dick for saying that shit to her. I bet if it was a man, he wouldn't have done that. But she handled that well. And she talked about how, there's a great deal in common with, states like Tennessee and Arizona, things like that. Here's what made me irritated about the speech. It's a perfectly fine speech, but it's not. You're in the target market for the things that you have to say. Okay, she's not at an event where she can expect Republicans to be there or the media to be there. She's at an event that only hardcore Democrats are going to be. That's the time when you do the red meat speeches. You get up there, you give them blood and thunder, you pound the fucking podium, you tell them exactly what they want to hear. You know, you use that time to get them fired up, energized to go out there and do shit. And that wasn't the kind of speech she gave. It was a nice speech. It was a very safe speech to give. And, you know, it didn't move my needle. It didn't move a lot of people's needles, I'm sure. In fact, we didn't really talk about it on the way home. We talked about other things, but we didn't really talk about her speech. We talked more about the guy who was there, who was the scientist, you know. And that's the bad thing. Because you got 4 people in the car. We're all, you know, we all paid $75. And after having to shell out money for the cat, the kitten, to see the vet, I've had to tap into my car fund, which I'm not thrilled about, but, you know, I had to go. I wanted to go. I wanted to make a statement. Wanted to see what it was like, and I hopefully wanted to be able to talk to Kyrsten Sinema and Mary Mancini, either of which I did. I mean, Kyrsten Sinema, she gave her speech, finished up, and then just walked out. I was nowhere near her at all during the time. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't get a good look at her. I could see her, but, you know, I was 50 feet, 100 feet away from her. She didn't mingle. She was done. When she was done with the speech, Mary Mancini said a few closing remarks, and then everybody just left. There was like no mixer or anything like that, which, I mean, there may have been, but that was probably at a level of donation that I couldn't afford, and there may have been one before that. I don't know, but, you know, that's something we, as a party, have got to work on. We've got to get these things more energetic. There's got to be more stuff done. Because we have to flip things here. And when I say flip things here, I mean the U.S., not merely Tennessee. We've got to get an overwhelming majority of Democrats in power at all levels of government if we're going to survive. Because things are pretty fucking nasty. And they're far worse than many of us know. Okay, and a final thought on the 3-star dinner that I want to say before shift to a couple other little topics here. I'm not bashing Kyrsten Sinema for, you know, having a highly polished speech that was basically by the numbers. I'm sure that she has to do a lot of these fundraising things, and that she's, you know, basically got one speech. She gives it all the fundraisers, whether they're, you know, for the party faithful, or whether they're for big donors, or, you know, for somebody at a campaign rally or something like that. And you know, I can understand that since she's probably busy, like a lot of the Democrats who are elected are, in trying to help raise money, that, you know, the only thing that she can do is have a speech that she gives at most of the functions that's identical with, you know, at so many seconds into the speech or so many minutes into the speech, you know, she plugs in things about the local community. And when she talked about how happy and excited she was to be here on the day when Nashville was having their Pride event. That was certainly sincere. And she could give a speech far better than I could. So I'm not denigrating her for that at all. I just wish that she had, 2 speeches that she memorized, one for, donors and big campaign functions where she knew there would be media or people from, who were independents or Republicans there who were kind of interested in the candidate she was representing, and then like I said, blood and thunder kind of speech for the folks who were, the party faithful, the party loyal, those who were already sold on everything the party had and just needed, to get riled up. Because that's what Trump does at his rallies. I mean, he gives, he doesn't give a speech designed to appeal to every American. He gives a speech designed to appeal to his base and get them riled up and ready to do all kinds of horrific things. And if we're going to successfully combat him, we need to be doing things like that ourselves and not just giving speeches saying, hold on a little longer, it'll be fine. Now, the other thing that I wanted to go over is that while I have been on my little podcasting vacation, I have been doing a lot of thinking about things. And one of the things that I've noticed is, as I briefly discussed before, is there are topics which are not being discussed that need to be discussed out there in our society. You will occasionally see articles talking about them, but they're not really facing some of the issues head on. And I want to start doing that. But I don't want to do it with this podcast. I want to do it with a podcast that is set up so it's not centered around atheism. I will keep doing this one, of course, but the other one, if I can get people to help me with it, because it cannot be just me. Not merely because I am not the kind of orator to be able to handle all that stuff, but it needs to be somebody other than just a middle-aged white male doing it. I have talked to a couple of people via Facebook about the idea. One of them has expressed some interest, not necessarily a lot of enthusiasm, but that may be because of some personal issues they're going through at the moment. I don't know. I'm not writing them off at all. But if everything goes according to plan, which it will not, but I will have a podcast coming out later on this year that will be a diverse panel of people from various sections of society. I would love to have somebody in the discussion who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I'd love to have, somebody who is African Americans, somebody who's an immigrant, somebody who is Latino, Hispanic, Latinx, whatever. Basically, I want it to be, ideally, I would be the only white male on it, and everybody else would be from a different protected class who is severely under threat. I don't know if I'll be able to do that, and it would sort of be a roundtable discussion type podcast thing, and not necessarily with the same hosts each week. So somebody would rotate in or rotate out, and things like that. I I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off. I don't know if I'll be able to find anybody who's willing to do some of the stuff involved. And most of what they would have to do would just be reading a few things and showing up and doing the record. But even that can be difficult because, everybody's got wildly different schedules, and there are people who, some of the other people I'd like to get would be podcasters, and of course they have to handle their own shows, so they may not have time. I don't know. I will keep you posted as it goes. Now, I will give you, as I leave, and next week will be more of the Pista Sophia, so apologies for that, but it'll be me and Skullbeard doing it, so, brace yourselves for that shit. But, I will give you something. I managed to get a recording of Lord Squeakington. Now, it's only a second, but Lord Squeakington, he, he's getting braver. He doesn't run for cover quite as fast as he used to. I still cannot get to pet him and things like that, but he's getting braver. And another thing I want to point out, he's been nicer to the kitten than Ash has. This happened the other night. I'm worried about the kitten, so I pick it up, and when I go to bed, and I carry it, and I get in the bed with it. And, the poor little thing's just terrified of everything right now. And Ash, plops himself into the bed. And I can't get the right shot of Ash, or I would put that in the show notes. But Ash is a big cat in the body, but he's got a little head, so he's really funny looking. He's not obese. He's maybe a little overweight, but not a lot. But he's just weird looking because he's got big fat body and a little teeny tiny head on it. So, anyways, and he's kind of a lumbering cat. He's not fast walking or anything like that. He just doesn't care. It's like the Basset Hound from Tiny Toons, if you ever saw that show. So, anyways, I'm going to bed. I got the kitten. I put the kitten in the bed so he, can curl up on me or next to me or whatever and feel secure. And start to get the covers adjusted. And Ash takes his paw and just bats the kitten off the fucking bed. The kitten was okay. Believe me, I leapt over and scooped it up off the floor and checked him out, and he was fine. That's just like, you little dick. Ash doesn't care about Fuzznuts. Actually, when Ash is out in the rest of the house, he'll lay on the couch, and as long as Fuzznuts doesn't get in his face, he doesn't give a shit what Fuzznuts does. But this kitten, Ash, man, he just came up and just went, boom, off the bed. But anyways, to Lord Squeakington. As I've said, I gave him the name because of noises he makes. And the other day, I finally managed to get a recording of him because I noticed that if he was out in the room when I was in the bed and I moved in just the right way, like put my foot on the floor, he would run off and make noises. And he sounds like a fucking wild turkey. I'm not kidding. I'm going to drop in right here. It's only a second of the noise that Lord Squeakington made when I started to get out of bed and he ran off. Now, the only thing I've done to the audio is amplify it because it was hard to hear. But you can hear that it does sound an awful lot like a wild turkey. Take a listen. See? That's and that's one of the sounds that he makes. That's actually kind of the most common sound. And sometimes he'll do it longer than that, but that was the only one I could get that was, a good enough recording I could work with. Okay. I am going to get out of here. I want to thank all of you all for putting up with me taking the vacation. I sorely needed it. You would not believe how much better I feel now that I've had the time off to relax, and refresh myself, and think about other things, and occasionally do a few other things. As I said, next week will be more of the Pistis Sophia. I will try to jazz it up a bit. And everything goes according to plan, and Skullbeard will be here, so it won't be just me reading that boring ass shit. And hopefully we don't have too much longer to go. I don't even remember where we were in the damn thing. I gotta check on that. I do keep track of that. Until then.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.